can share. But I guess like what, I would say, and I'll say this, rhetorically, like, why are you here? You started a business because you worked in a space, because you had a passion. Somebody turned you on to an idea, but I'm guessing that you did not start the business to be an SDR or a BDR or an AE or a chief sales officer, but yet here we are. So, and that's kind of the life of a founder. So again, thanks for being here, and we'll go ahead and hop in and get started. By the way, I spent my entire marketing budget on the creatives in Ireland, so this is about as creative as it gets until the last slide. So.
Just to interrupt real quick, I have
Sure.
everything muted. So if you do want to say something, you can put it in the chat, or I don't know, Dana, do you want people just unmute and talk?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean,
Okay.
we're amongst friends. So if
Yeah.
if somebody wants to talk, I said, if it starts to get a little off base, maybe we can table it and circle back around so we get through.
Okay. So feel free to unmute.
Yeah, that's great. So just a word from our audience here. Some of you were kind enough to submit a few comments and questions and thoughts prior to. I think that we'll touch on some of these throughout today. Some of them I might circle back around with you individually or send you a note. But again, if we're talking about something that seems applicable and you had brought this out, mention one of these things, please feel free to ask as well. But following a sales process is super important, and we're going to definitely hit on that. Lead generation is part of that as well. Content creation, being an industry expert, I think that is super important, and we're definitely going to talk about that too. Pricing, SaaS pricing, anything for that matter, and increasing user adoption. Digital sales channels, that's one that I probably have a bit of a blind spot to. So I will follow up accordingly with the person that asked that, and maybe try to point them in the right direction. And then closing deals and not getting ghosted. I see one of my words got cut off there, but not getting ghosted, which is, that's it, right? And then the best tactics for some cold outreach. And just so everybody knows too, we have folks here on the call today, or at least had registered, that like, hey, I'm a solopreneur and I'm doing B2C, to, I raised a couple $1 million. So we've got the spectrum here. There's learnings that we can all take away from it. So again, I hope this is a good half hour or so for you. So hopping right in the agenda, I'll tell you a little bit about me and most importantly, why it matters to you. Get into the problem-solving mindset. The 4 questions I ask everybody that I ever talk to. So if you've talked to me before, certainly in the last year and a half, 2 years, we've talked about this. Moving those conversations forward in kind of a practical way. And then some tips, for advancing the sales pipeline. This will all be high level. So, again, feel free to chime in, or, let's follow up afterwards. And then we'll do some Q&A and my little words of wisdom that I always have. And I could fill up pages of them, of things and quips and quotes that I've taken away from people. So anyhow, about me professionally, my professional cred, I was an enterprise B2B salesperson for almost 18 years. I sold call center solutions, so technology and people. Sold it into the enterprise, so it was selling into like AT&T, BMW, Nike, Omaha Steaks, companies like that. Had my own if not now when epiphany, probably 14, 15 years ago, about wanting to do something different. I enjoyed sales at that point, and I can tell you why I enjoyed it. I can tell you why I did not enjoy it just prior to that. But I wanted to do something different, and so I ended up starting my own company called Sun. Has to do with the Beatles song "Here Comes the Sun." And my thought process around that was like, how can I help small business owners here in the region operationalize their sales processes? And I felt compelled to speak to it because I too was the first salesperson in the company that I had worked for selling into some of these industries, and I didn't know things like, I didn't have a sales deck, a CRM tool, I didn't know sales cycles, I didn't know value propositions, I didn't know ICPs, I didn't know personas, all things that you probably have heard of before. And there's a lot of small business owners that struggle to hire salespeople for various reasons. But in any case, got recruited away to work for a bike share company out of Cambridge, Mass. Needed a general manager for Ohio and Michigan to sell bike share solutions like the bike share that we see around the region or other parts of the country to cities, colleges, universities, corporations, et cetera. So I took a leap. I knew nothing about venture-backed tech. but I thought I would try it out, and I love it because two things. First of all, that is the number one goal of all tech companies. I am going to speak a lot about tech today. I know there's some other folks on the call that aren't tech related, but again, hopefully a lot of this is applicable to what you're doing as well. But I loved it because you were incented to grow, and then what I really loved about it is you could take this thing like a bike, and I knew bikes. I've been riding bikes my whole life, but you take this bike and go around and tell different stories with this bike and solve different problems and tell different stories based on your audience. So I could be selling to the brewery on the near west side of Cleveland. I could have been selling to the Ohio State University that had 15 different departments and folks in the room. I could be selling to General Motors in Warren, Michigan. These are all real stories too, by the way. And for each of them, it had a different use case and different story, and I loved it. And that kind of started my tech journey. So, I worked with them. I was recruited to a company, an AI company in Michigan a couple of years ago. Well, I guess it would have been 6 or 7 years ago now, and started selling into the enterprise again from a startup perspective. So, it's a little different when you're a company that's been around for 15, 20 years, selling into the enterprise because there's a reputation there. But when you're a startup, they don't know who you are. They don't know your company. They don't know your solution. They don't even know they have a problem sometimes, and you have to educate them on all these things. It's a challenge, and so I hope I bring some value in having those two different experiences and having failed some things and having had some success too. And by the way, most of you know this already. If you're ever asking anybody for advice and they won't tell you what they did wrong, walk away, because I don't. We've all made mistakes, and so we should own them and learn from them as well. I went through VC University. I'm certified. I've been an entrepreneur in residence with Jumpstart. I'm a preferred partner now to a couple of the ecosystem partners as well, and I'm working with other investors and accelerators. That's a professional cred. The street cred is like my first job was selling copiers, and I was horrible at it. That's the real thing. There were two guys that got me into it. They were really good at it. They were really slick. They did really good demonstrations, and they could flip through the paper. And I just never got it. I worked there for 6 months, and I sold a copier or a fax machine, and that was it. I probably like $600 or $800. So my sales career was almost short-lived. But I ended up getting a job working in account management, and then proceeded to go sell call center solutions for a company in Akron. And as I said, when I started that, I didn't have the tools in place to help me be successful, and I wasn't as good as I needed to be either. I was probably at the point in the early, I'm dating myself now, but early 2000s, where I was either going to quit because I couldn't get anything across the line, or I was going to get fired, one of the two. And I went in during my annual review, and I said, hey, I met this guy in Michigan who has this company. He said, there's this thing called, there's a sales training. I won't advocate for it, but it was sales training. And it was very process oriented. And he's like, you should go check it out. And I told them, I'm like, give me 6 months, I'll stay on board. I don't need a raise, even though it's my annual, and I probably wasn't gonna get one anyways, but pay for this training and let me see if I can make this happen. And so I went from almost getting fired or quitting to employee of the year the following year, having sold a lot. And all I did differently really was my mindset. My mindset was different, and I understood that there was a process involved that really, and excuse me, I'm not accustomed to talking this much. So sales 101 is don't talk this much, but this is kind of what we're doing today. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to chime in. But the thing about it is learning that there was a process, and whether I want there to be a process or not, it's either theirs or mine, right? And I needed to understand that there was a process in place. And so being able to really, ask a lot of good questions and educate people on what we did and learn about what they did, it helped me. And I hope that I've been able to bring that to some of the to the companies I've worked with over the last couple of years. So, any questions? I'll get off of this about me now. All right, good. So real quick, we'll run through some of the problem-solving mindset, and these are things that you guys know already, like why startups fail just in general, and why sales is important, and why you tech founder can sometimes struggle with that, right? So we'll hop into that. I'm going to take a quick look at my notes too, because I wanted to make sure I hit everything. There we go. Cool. All right. But again, I really want to leave today, like just, I want to get into the mindset of like why this is really important and then how we can start to think about it, from the customer side of the table. So anyhow, we all know startups fail. There's no market need. They run out of cash, whether that's money they've, taken in from friends and family, or they've raised money, or maybe even some revenue. Poor product fit, strong competition, and not the right team. I will tell you, those first five, those are all customer related challenges that can be solved for more quickly talking to customers. Now, I won't sit here and say that companies wouldn't go out of business and fail, but I guarantee they would fail faster because they would have learned things more quickly along the line. And I think that's one thing as founders and sales founders specifically need to be comfortable with is not fearing the failure and wanting to fail quick if we're going to do it, which sounds counterintuitive to this very positive show we're at today. So next, why it's super important, this is kind of the positive side of it, because you need to validate product market fit, right? You got to get customer feedback. We need to generate revenue. I mean, revenue is great because it's non-dilutive. So if you ever want to, raise money for your startup and not give away a bunch of equity, you can go sell something. That is certainly helpful. It also demonstrates traction to investors, and it really builds your expertise as a thought leader in the space too. And again, I know some people had asked about that earlier, and I think it's super important. I want to go back. I just want to dive in real quick. I know this is not an investor conversation today, but I've sat probably in 200 investor pitches over the last 3 years. Between the ecosystem partners, other mentor opportunities I have, clients that I've worked with that I've sat in theirs, and I will tell you almost invariably, when the company does not get money, it's because they haven't exhibited one of these three things, right? They haven't talked to enough people. They don't understand the market. They don't understand the pricing model. They don't have product market fit. They can't tell a story, about the market. And I wish there was a way to shortcut it, but the only way to be able to do that is to get out and continue to talk to folks. So tech founders, why do we struggle? Because we fell in love with the technology. We're super smart in what we do. Just FYI, I know nothing about tech. I'm the least technical person on the call, I'm sure. And I am almost certain that I'm the least technical person in any conversation I'm in when I'm in this space. But what I feel like is super important is being able to go out and tell that story. But there's a lot of focus on product development early on. Sales experience is lacking. Just basically underestimating the importance of sales. I think it's changed, and some people on this call might be able to add context to that, as you're thinking about it. But 6-7 years ago, there were companies raising a lot of money on an idea. Like, I've got this idea about this thing that might happen if somebody could actually do it. And they're like, hey, here's a check, for that. I don't think that's the case today. And I don't know though if the founder mindset has caught up yet with the need to show traction and drive, show some sort of revenue, even if it's not a lot. But in any case, difficulty in communicating value, which is storytelling, fear of rejection. We all have that. I'll say this sounds like blasphemy for me to say, but I'll say it. And I don't even know who's on the call now, but I will say it anyways. We have to get comfortable with like the fact that nobody cares what we do. Like when I meet somebody in this space, I'm coming as a founder and I'm very proud of the work that I've done. Most of the time, they don't really care. They don't care. I mean, on a human level, I'm sure they care about you, but they really don't care. They will start to care, and they can start to care after they know that you understand them a little bit. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But limited network, we all only have so many friends. And then really not understanding customer needs. So we talked about that again. So I won't go through all these. We talked about revenue and runway and business model, product, raising capital. I do also want to talk about, just briefly though, developing of partnerships. I know something that a lot of founders like to talk about, like, hey, I want to develop these channel partners. In order to get channel partners, you've got to be able to go talk to people as well. It's not any different. It's just a different type of selling, but it is still selling nonetheless. And then attracting good talent. I mean, when you are ready to go hire, whether it's from the tech side or the sales side, people are going to want to know what you've done and who you've talked to. And I think it's important for you to know that. And then just demonstrating leadership and building company culture and morale, which again, these things get hard, and I think it's important for us to be able to do that. So why is it about solving problems, helping businesses identify and solve their problems? Of course, being skilled at asking the right question, and not only just asking the right question, but asking the right follow-up question to that question. We sit in, I think that we get into presentations sometime, and we're so, we're excited about what we're doing, we're presenting, and we know we're nailing our presentation. We'll ask the question because we know that we're supposed to ask the question. The prospect will answer that question, and then we just keep going. And we need to be able to get out of our own way and stop and say, tell me more about that. Well, what does that mean? Well, how does that affect you? How does that affect other people? And really digging in deep. It also builds trust. There's a whole sales model built on know, like, trust. And some of you probably have heard that before. I know you've heard me say it if you've been around me enough. But people will not buy anything from you until they trust you. And they can't trust you till they like you, and they can't like you till they know you. And there's no way to short circuit that. And you can think about any purchase that you've ever made in your life, any consequence. And we've had to do that: cars, houses, things like that. And then navigating complex sales cycles. It's already complicated on the tech side oftentimes, because not only are we selling to a buyer, but we're selling to the users, and we're selling to other people that can say no. But if what we're doing as a founder, as a tech company, is different, the way people are going to buy it is different. And then we need to be able to articulate that sales process for them. And it is complex. But if we have enough people, we recognize patterns, we can start to document things that we're hearing, and then do that. So any questions? I feel like I'm talking fast, but I feel like I have a lot to go through. Cool. All right. So shifting from pitching to solving. So, obviously taking the customer-centric approach, leading with the value about what's in it for them, not what's in it for me, making an emotional connection. This is important with sales as well as investing. I've heard investors oftentimes, and again, I know this isn't an investor call, but I think it's important and it's applicable to the sales calls as well, is, making some sort of emotional connection to what it is they're doing. And I'll give you an example. If I'm a tech founder, I have a tech solution that will solve a problem in the supply chain, and I know the person that is responsible for that in the supply chain has to keep missing that. And this may be overly simplistic, but I just want you to think about it this way. Because we're having these issues, I get phone calls all night. I get it all weekend too. I also don't get to go to my kids' games anymore. That's an emotional connection to make. I understand the tech solves a problem. I understand there's an ROI that you probably worked out on that, but we need to be able to talk enough and go deep enough to be able to get some sort of emotional connection to this. And then again, and this is kind of redundant maybe, but just framing what you do around what the problem is. So my 4 questions that I always ask is, what's the problem? Sounds super simple, right? So what's the problem? Is it your personal experience? Have you worked someplace? Did your friend tell you about it? Have you done customer discovery? Just before some of you jumped on the call, we were acknowledging one of today's participants for completing I-Core. Have you gone through a program where you've talked to at least 20 people who could actually buy your stuff, to ask them questions, to learn, to recognize patterns, and to see if you're on the right path? There's market research available. I'm not a big fan of going to buy somebody else's market research, but I think that we as founders, that's why we're founders. We're gritty and we do the heavy lifting. We do it ourselves. But networking in industry association and professional organizations is super important. And then engaging with thought leaders. So just because a thought leader is not talking about what I do and is not even talking about my problem, we should figure out who those people are, because they're talking about something and people are listening. And so there may be ways for us to take what our solution is and what it solves for, and realize that it also solves for that. Or if we just talked about it just a little differently, maybe it would address something and get someone's attention. Who said it's a problem? This kind of goes in line with the first part, but again, is it just you? Is it others that you've talked to in industry? And have you done the heavy lifting of customer discovery? So I've got a quick exercise. You don't have to do it, but I'll take 30 seconds just to give you time if you want to. But just thinking about what it is you do, what is the problem? And being able to articulate that pretty succinctly, not what you do, but again, what the problem is, articulating that pretty succinctly in 2 or 3 sentences at the most. And then I would ask, within that organization, and let's say automotive or manufacturing, within that manufacturing business, there are other people, there's other personas. There's the operations persons, there's a CFO, there's a CEO, there's the people on the floor that are actually using the equipment every day. Have we thought about what their specific problems are as it pertains to their business, and how what we do solves it for them? And it may sound like, well, those are the same thing, but they're not. Again, so thinking macro, what's the big problem for the industry? And then specifically, what's the problem for the person sitting, at the desk or on the floor? So I will give it, I've got a clock. You have 13 more seconds, and then I'm going to move on. And I'm going to give you the opportunity at the end too, that you can email it to Chandler, or send it to me, or whatever you want to do, and I'll be happy to take a look at this and have a further conversation about it if it makes sense. So moving on, who said it's a problem? Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry, my arrow. Come on, arrow. There you go. How much does the problem cost? This is a hard one, right? Because they don't print it, they don't put it on their website. How much this problem is costing them. But I like to think I'd like to think about costs in terms of like time, people, errors, quality, QA, and then it always comes down to dollars, right? So that's what it is. So there's the actual cost, and then there are also opportunity costs. So because I don't have this solution in place today, what opportunities am I missing out on, and how can I articulate that? They may or may not be able to share that with you, but if you do the research and do the homework, you will be able to help educate them on some of those things as well, which makes you the trusted advisor, as you're sitting across from them talking about what it is you do. But again, these are all customer facing, type activities. So quick exercise, another 30 seconds. For you yourselves, do you feel as though that you have a cost associated with what the problems are that the people are dealing with that you're selling into? I sat in the I-Core programs this week. I was a mentor for the first time, and I'm grateful, and I'm a big fan of the program. I think as many conversations as they have, I think that was an opportunity for them to continue to be able to vet that out, like what's the cost. So just because somebody doesn't have the schedule, or because somebody miscommunicates, what does that mean? Again, what are those costs associated with? So just, again, time, people, errors. Do you know how they were calculated? So how do these things get calculated? Because sometimes their calculations aren't the real calculations. And again, this is a chance for us to help educate. And then can you attach those costs with a specific line of business? So when you go tell that story to others, you can also share. And then extra credit, how did you get that information if somebody told you? So I'm always interested in learning how people are teasing out information from others. Has anyone said they'd fix it? This is the big one, right? This gets into making sure we're talking to buyers. So it's important to talk to all the other stakeholders as well, the influencers, the users, people that can say no. And by the way, it's important to find those people quickly in an organization. We should not avoid them. But has someone said, yes, this is a problem, this is what it's costing me, and I would actually pay to fix it? And have we also baked into our calculation the change management piece of the cost, right? So I used to tell people all the time, like, hey, if I have a $1,000 solution and you have a $50,000 problem, math-wise, that works out pretty well. There's a good ROI on that. But if I have a $1,000 solution and you have a $2,000 problem, even though there's ROI there might be costs associated with change downstream or with that buyer directly that we need to account for. Does anybody have any questions about that? Just real quickly, because I feel like I don't speak enough about this piece of it. Any thoughts, questions? All right, cool.
Well, I guess, Dana,
Sure.
that's why everybody says 10x, right? Because 10x, it blows away any kind of change management, 2-to-1, 3-to-1. Sure, it makes sense, but then I got to go through this stuff and I got to get budget. 10x, it becomes a no-brainer. Isn't that kind of the logic there? Why people try and state that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, and thank you, Quentin. It's good to see you too, by the way. For asking. I in the stage of where we're sitting, and I generally work from seed stage to Series A. I mean, that's usually, if I'm talking about my ICP of, entrepreneurial support, EIR support or whatever. At that stage, it's hard to get to that number, I guess, and to be able to show it. I mean, I guess my thought would be, if you're able to show that, then where are we having a problem, right? Too, like, so is there something else then, if we haven't progressed as we would want to? But it's a great question, and that may be, I work primarily in software and SaaS software. I mean, that may be specific to another industry. I don't know. I don't. Has anyone else on the call? Does anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I also think it's who you're trying to raise from. So if you went to like Drive, they're not going to speak with you unless your market is 100x, 200x. But a lot of the pre-seed funds are 10x. So I think that's hard to be a yes or no answer.
Yeah, and I guess this is interesting too. How you show that, and how you articulate that is really interesting at this stage, again, because most of the people, I won't say most of the people in this call, but I know most of the people that I come in contact with, they may have something that they've got out in the wild and people are using, but it's not delivering that type of value to anybody. Yeah, they've got it in people's hands. They're using it. They're getting feedback on it. It works. It doesn't work. Most of the time it doesn't work exactly like it's supposed to, and that's okay. But somebody's interested in solving a problem that they said they'd use it. But that's a good question, Quentin. Thank you for asking. And then, what are some of the questions? Just following up here, what are some of the questions we could be asking to learn about the decision-making process without asking about the decision-making process? And, are you having success with that? And are there some, if you have anything that you like to share? But again, I want you to be thinking about how we're learning about that as well, when we're having these conversations with people who are telling us, yes, they could buy this if it was available. All right, I think we're making pretty good time. So moving the conversation forward, we're talking a lot about discovery and customer conversations and things like that. I want to ask quickly, pre-call planning. I'll just assume everybody does some, and if you don't, that's okay. We'll talk about why it's super important. So again, this is just a study for you, an exercise for you, and again, you're welcome to share it here in this very safe space, or again, just to start thinking about it. What type of pre-call plan do you have for each of your prospect engagements? And let me ask you this question too, and you do not have to answer this, but your last prospect call, did you do some pre-call planning? Because I know it's something that we all know we need to do, but do we do it every time? How many of you looked me up on LinkedIn before we got on this call today? Now, some of you know me, so you wouldn't have had to look me up on LinkedIn. There was a question earlier in the earlier words or thoughts from the audience about prospecting and cold prospecting. And there is so much public information available now about companies and people. There is really no reason for a completely cold call anymore. The call should be warm, right? So, I would just make sure, that we are doing that type of work. And it doesn't take a lot of time. You don't have to have access to PitchBook or Crunchbase, to be able to do it. But, get on LinkedIn, do a Google search, go to the website, look at their blogs. I find it hilarious. I'll share this. This is funny. I was working with a tech company, a couple of weeks ago, and they had engaged a consultant to help them with some of their back office sales, and they had this expertise in sales and marketing or whatever. And so I looked at them. They had said, hey, check them out for me. So I did, and their marketing on their blog was in 2016, their last blog. And I said, do you realize that Obama was president? There had not been a global pandemic yet, since the last time these guys did that. So anyhow, these things are interesting when you go and do a little research ahead of time, because it really helps you get in the mindset, with the people that you're going to talk to. Think about specifically when you're doing these pre-call planning. This pre-call planning is, what information do I need to learn? Like, what specifically do I need to know? If we're getting the number of at-bats that we all want, so if we're doing 3 or 4 or 5 calls a week, I don't want to spend an hour and a half with everybody that I'm not doing business with, right? So what can I tease out of somebody in 30 minutes that I know that it's worthwhile for me to take that second call? So again, being very thoughtful about like what things we need, what do we need to share and what do we need to learn? And then I guess this is just for you to be thinking about this, like what types of information would you like to have for that first call? Other than, how to get a purchase order or whatever you need, but what type of information do you struggle with sometimes? And again, I'm happy to follow back up with anybody to kind of talk through that with some of the things that I've learned from other people and myself. So some practical tips for advancing the pipeline: discovery. Everybody's probably tired of hearing me talk about discovery, but be a problem solver, personalizing the approach, not just to the company, but to the person that you're actually speaking to. Really prioritize relationship building. I think it's a lost art. I think certainly with us being, a lot of our sales activity being virtual, it's lost, but there's still ways to build relationships. And especially if you have a price point or, an average contract value, $10, $15, $20,000. I mean, you need, at these early stages, you need to spend some time, developing those relationships. I don't care what approach you use. I'm a Sandler guy, but be consultative in your selling approach. I think it's really important not to come in and dump all your wares, on the table and talk about everything that you can do and solve for. Make sure you're measuring and analyzing these metrics too. Things, for me, time kills deals, and it kills businesses. So if we're taking 5, 6, 7 calls to get to know when I could have got there in 3, let's do that so we can get on to more, positive revenue generating type activities. And then just be prepared to iterate, because we're going to be wrong. So I think it's liberating to know that we're going to be wrong, because we can say, hey, I was wrong about that. We need to pivot and we need to take a different approach to that.
Dana,
then,
one question for you.
Please. Hey, Sean.
One thing that I've seen, so I work for a IT consulting firm, so selling services essentially. And what advice do you have when I think ghosting was a term represented earlier, when you share what problems that your organization can solve, your technology, your people, whatever, and then you share pricing, for example, and then you don't hear back because despite numerous outreach and good conversation, ultimately up to that. Any tips there?
This is one of my favorite things to talk about, because it happens so frequently, and so it's a problem, right? I have a founder that I was working with about a month and a half ago, who said, hey, do you have an hour? I want to talk to you, about some of the challenges I'm having. It was specifically ghosting, and he said, I've got 8 proposals out right now, and I'm getting ghosted on all of them. And so he said, so let's set up an hour and we'll go through them. We'll go through all 8. We never made it through the first one after an hour. And for me, it's, my first question was like, what did you know that made you feel like you should send 8 proposals out to someone? And I think that driving the process and articulating your process, and this isn't pushing yourself on people, or this is not pushing your solution on anybody. But I mean, I think that oftentimes, whether we're just in sales or certainly as a tech founder, we're in love with the technology and we're in love with what we built, right? But we have to start thinking of ourselves as a founder and as a business leader and as a CEO. Your time is valuable also. So you have the right to be able to ask certain questions and to set certain expectations. It doesn't mean that people are never going to disappoint you and do the wrong thing. But for me, and maybe it's because I have young kids. They're not as young as they were, but they're 10 and 12 now. So I try to oversimplify things that, I think everything should be at the ready call close. Like, hey, we're going to introduce ourselves. If it makes sense, we're going to have another call. We're going to, learn more and share more, and we'll do a demonstration of capabilities. All the right people should be in the room. And then that next call is like, hey, are we doing this or not? And people are going to move you off of that because things happen. The CIO has to get involved because he needs to make sure that you're SOC 2 compliant, and you didn't know that. But the thing is, I learned, now I know, hey, CIO's got to be involved in this next call, or else we're not doing this next call. You as a salesperson, and the thing is, when we want to sell, now we're getting into like what I really love, like the selling piece of it. Like you get to say no too. So, and Sean, I can't say this is specific to you or your team, but I have a process that I'm going to deliver. Like I have experience, like I'm a thought leader. I know how to deliver this. I know how to deliver it successfully, and I can tell you where it's failed. And if I'm sending you information without a clear, path to closing, like I need to understand specific. And these some of these things seem super basic, but it's, when are you making a decision on this? Do you have budget already? Now, I don't come out and ask these questions because they sound very, cheesy, but there's things that you can do. And I think I asked one of the quick exercises, like, what are some of the questions that we can ask? But like, asking people, hey, last time you onboarded new software, how did that work? Because if I ask somebody early on, like, hey, how did, if you were to buy this today, who's involved in that process and how long does it normally take? Even if they want to tell you, which most of the time they won't, but even if they want to tell you, they can't think, like just psychologically, it's harder to think ahead, like how this is going to work. But I can certainly tell you about how it worked before. So like, oh yeah, we had, we brought on a new CRM. I'm being overly simplistic again, but we brought on a new CRM tool. Oh, how did that work? Well, they came in, they pitched it, and how did that go? Did it, I mean, do you get what I'm saying here? Like, there's a lot of like conversation and storytelling about like how that thing worked last time, because that'll give me a pretty clear idea as to how it will probably work this time, or the next time, if that makes sense. But I, myself, I don't, this is just me. I don't like to deliver pricing unless I know that there's a yes at the end of this. If everything that you've told me you need and we've delivered and there's nothing else, the price should be like, we're just doing this, right? Like, and that, I guess this gets into my, I'll keep moving along here really quick. This gets into my so many words of wisdom. It's math usually. So like, if I can tell a story and make it a math problem for people, then like I'm not really selling. It's like, hey, when I go to McDonald's, they're not selling me anything. I mean, they might be, giving me a biggie fries or something, but they don't really have to sell me. Like, I already know what it is, and I know what I'm getting. I know how much it costs. We're doing this. So anyhow, I'd love to talk about this more. Like, and so I don't want to. I felt like I probably went deeper than I needed to, and hopefully didn't bore the rest of our audience. But Sean, yeah, if you'd like to talk about that more, I'd be happy to do it. Just to learn specific.
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dana.
Yeah. So I guess just in closing, for me, and again, this is counterintuitive for me to talk for 47 minutes, but here we are, right? You need to be the best first salesperson, and you don't have a choice. And I again, I want to thank you all and commend you all for being here, because I'm preaching to the converted. Like, this is important. There are hundreds of founders all through Northeast Ohio today who need help selling, and I hope they get help wherever they need it, but they have to do it, and they have to lean into it, and it can't be number 11 on a list of 10 things that they need to do, and they really need to prioritize it. Getting into seek to understand before being understood. That's it. Fall in love with the business. Don't fall in love with the tech. I hear that a lot with investors too. The team will come in and pitch, and they love the tech. They can tell you everything about the tech. They don't know anything about the business. So, being different is better than being cheaper or better. Because cheaper or better, can come along tomorrow. And I think, and this is my own opinion, as an early stage tech company, you won't win the features war, because if it's just features, Amazon or Google or somebody else can come out with another feature tomorrow, and now your feature isn't relevant anymore. to really try to be different. You know, and execute. You know what? It doesn't matter if you get it wrong, but you got to go do it. Like, so don't over plan. As much as I am all about pre-call planning, you know, I've had founders tell me like, oh, I need to plan, to call these people. I was like, I don't care if you plan or not, at this point, I would just rather you do something and have that bias towards action. So that's it. That's all I have.
Hey, Dana, I have a question for you.
Sure.
So with the sales process, I listened to a book on Audible called The Science of Selling, or Selling More with Science. And he talked about the 6 steps, the 6 whys of selling. Have you ever come across that?
I haven't come across that particular book. I will say that all of the trainings and as soon as I say this, you'll find one where I'm wrong, but conceptually are all the same. I mean, it's identifying a problem and how do we do that? We ask good questions, and it's around why, right? So I've not come across that specific book, but conceptually, yes. And again, I think all of the ones that people are familiar with, it's just a different flavor. Something for Sandler kicked in for me. I don't know what it was. Sometimes we're ready to hear it. Sometimes we hear things,
Right.
we're not ready to hear it yet, and then we hear it and like, oh, that was it.
Right.
But the one other thing too, and regardless of what you do, and I'm an advocate of audiobooks and go to a cohort training if you like. But I think having it clicked for me when I had somebody sitting in the seat beside me that could help me get my real activity over the line. And I'll give you a quick example. Most of us learned how to drive a car initially. We were sitting in a classroom with a bunch of other teenagers. We were all talking about what yield signs were and stop signs and, turning on, right on red. And that's great, right? We learned, but we didn't really learn. And I failed my first driving test until I hit, I didn't see the guy coming, and the person beside me slammed on the brake and said, what just happened here? Did you not see that? Right? That made me learn, what it meant to look both ways, before I crossed. And so what I would really suggest is do all the trainings, listen to audiobooks, because again, something will click with you, but make sure you surround yourself, whether it's with founders or other types of sales support, that people who know it and can talk about it, and you can work through like a real specific issue that you're having, if that makes sense. So.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that greatly.
You're more than welcome, and feel free to reach out again afterwards. I'm happy to help.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I had a quick one, if you don't mind me
Sure.
happening. You mentioned the importance of these customer discovery meetings and whatnot. In the B2B business, how do you usually go about setting those up or finding those intros to the right person to have that initial customer discovery conversation with?
Yeah, so the initial conversation is especially after you're out, and I'm just making sure I get to the questions that other people had. So if we need to follow up, the outreach is about them, and there's a program, and I do it myself, but there's a program that a friend of mine runs, heavy on LinkedIn. So some people love LinkedIn, some people not. But I think that at the earliest stages, you're doing outreach to people to say, hey, you're in a space, I'm in a space. And again, if you can make this as tailored as possible. Now, my colleague, he's got a little bit more of a slight more of a shotgun approach. Like he'll do more. But I can wordsmith 2 or 3 lines, and then I can pull something from a post that you made, or something that happened with your company. Like, hey, I saw you guys just expanded into Michigan. That's awesome. Would love to connect and learn more. Keep in touch about how you guys are doing things. Right? I mean, it's about them, right? It wasn't. They still don't know. I forget who asked that question. Alan, was that Alan that asked the question? They still don't know Alan, and they don't know your business, so they don't know you, but they know that you're interested in them. So now, okay, sure, I'll take that LinkedIn, invitation. I follow back up and say, hey, I saw you guys were doing this. Like the thing is, it's got to be relevant to them, right? If it's not relevant, and I always ask people, like, think about the last time that you responded to a cold outreach yourself. go through your email and bin, go through your LinkedIn request, go through a phone call that you may have gotten. What was the last thing that you responded to? It was something that was super relevant to you, I'm sure. I make jokes like there's 2 or 3 people that have done like, wow, that was really good outreach. Yeah, I mean, you nailed, like I literally took the email and I responded back to them and said, hey, I see what you do. I'd like to learn more as well, right?
Mm.
That's probably the holy grail of that initial outreach, but it's really making it about them. And once they connect, deliver value. Hey, and this is probably a longer conversation, but I talked a little bit about industry organizations and professional associations and things like that. That's where people congregate. If you're going to be in a industry, you need to immerse yourself in that community. So like for me, it was fintech. So when I was working with the startup out of Michigan, we were in the fintech space. So Finovate, Money 2020, those were like the 2 big events. So I went to their site, I looked at everything that they were doing, who was talking, and I immersed myself with those people. And I also took the things that they were talking about and I started talking about them too. So now I'm part of this, right? And then people know that you're part of this community, they're going to be a little more open. But if you don't have a LinkedIn presence, you've never said a word about fintech, I don't trust you. Let me see. I should pull this up because I didn't clean it up, but this was super interesting. I saw it yesterday. I apologize for everybody not having it. I wasn't going to show this, but where? No. Silent deal killers. So this is an article I read yesterday, and these were silent deal killers. So these are the things that you don't even get a chance to pitch, but these are the things that kill your deals before you even get a chance to talk to somebody. And it goes through being new, and they don't think that you can scale, and you're not secure, and you can't afford it. I mean, all these things, and there was a story behind all these, right? So this is the story behind it, and these are some ideas and ways to overcome those things early on. And you need to talk about these things early on to take these deal killers off the table. But you've got to talk to them in a way that they are accustomed to talking about themselves and other people in the industry. And again, happy to talk about this more if you like.
Super helpful. Thank you.
Anybody else? I'm sorry. I feel like I'm all over the place.
No, Dana, you're great. This is great.
Did everybody see my hoodie, by the way? I know it's 90 degrees outside, but I'm wearing a hoodie today for everybody. It's either this or USA. And I thought, you know what? I know my audience, so I'm going to be here. Anything else I can help?
I think, Dan, one of my challenges is doing a lot of AI stuff. It's new, education, and being this kind of subject matter expert, and just I'd say getting some of those, and to your point, educating the customers on the problem they don't even know they have yet. And I know it's kind of maybe it's product market fit, whatever, but I think those things are changing. And I just think, honestly, once I get someone, I can have a good conversation, but it's just getting that top of the funnel. And I'm kind of moving more towards kind of account-based marketing and some of those LinkedIn tactics you talked to, but just being kind of super focused on some key themes and trying to hit them. But I don't know, that's where I'm struggling, is how to get some of that top of the funnel stuff,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a marketing guy. I think I even said something, you can't market your way to sales. And you can't automate it either, certainly at the earlier stages. I mean, because I think I have a lot of founders, and I'm not saying this is you, but I have other founders. They get 2 or 3 deals and they're like, I need to automate this. We need to automate. And I'm like, there's nothing to automate. Like what, so like, go get 20 or 25, and then we have some ideas. One thing I would add, Quentin, if you're getting people that are talking to you and they're interested in you, ask them where other people are.
Yeah.
Where do you go for thought leadership, right?
Yeah.
And then say, hey, you know what? I just got off the call with Dana. He said that you were a thought leader in this space. I'd love to connect. I mean, that doesn't get any better than that, right? So, you know, I think, you know, some of it seems overly simplistic again, but we you know, we forget sometimes. Like I forget, like I should have asked that question. But we've got to be, you know, we've got to be intent. And if there's, you know, you're fortunate because if you've got people that you're talking to, you can go talk to them and learn more. You know, for the ones that don't have anything, again, you've got to come from their side of the table. So anyhow, I know, Chandler, I want to be respectful of your time, everybody's time. I'm good, but I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I know we're up against it.
I actually have a question, real quick. So I get a lot of, I have this question come up a lot from some of our portcos that haven't met you yet, Dana. Maybe they're too early to even meet with you. And maybe some of the founders on this call can answer this. What is the typical time for a tech company to build a relationship and close the sale? Like, what is there a standard that you all shoot for? Or that should you be shooting for? I mean, clearly it's not typically going to happen on the first call. So how long does it take in general?
I'll let the founders answer first.
If you're doing anything in healthcare, it takes years, not weeks or months or calls.
Okay.
That's my experience.
That's everything in healthcare.
Yeah. Chandler, I would say, you know, cost is an issue, right? Who can sign off on that? You know, I've got a founder I'm working with. They charge $5,000 because they know that it doesn't need approval. Now that's a horrible reason to charge $5,000, but that's what they do. Are we displacing an incumbent? You know, do we have to kick somebody out, you know, in order to get in? You know, that's a whole other thing, right? EdTech has their rhythm of like kind of how they, you know, when they review technology and how they buy it. So I think it's probably fairly industry specific. Yeah. I mean, when I sold call centers, it was 18 months. That's what I mean, from the first time I said hi to you, but I was also displacing somebody.
That's a long time, you know, to keep on something. So it's good to know that it just can take.
But if you can peel off a pilot, you know, like if you can, here's the thing, this is really important. It's probably, and I didn't say this earlier. I was I was selling fintech and I was on a call with Wells, JPMC, Citi, whatever. It was other, you know, SVPs of partnerships, whatever. They said this, and I never forgot this. They said, if you want to engage with us, there's 3 things you got to do. You got to make it easy. You got to help me go faster in whatever it is I'm trying to do. And you've got to be able to point to where you're doing it someplace else. That's it. So get your stuff in somebody's hands and let them use it so you can at least say somebody's using it. You know, this is where I'm getting feedback. This is what they like about it. This is what we learned we were wrong about. Like that is, you can build so much trust and credibility so quickly when you can say that. So, I mean, at all costs necessary, you know, get your stuff in somebody's hands, and then, you know, white glove it and make sure you're getting feedback. We didn't talk about pilots, it's a whole other thing, but like when you're putting pilots and things like that on people's hands, you need to understand what success looks like. And you need to understand that there's a contract, you know, an MSA at the end of this thing, or don't do it unless you're in this weird place where like, I just need somebody using my stuff so I can, you know, so I can show it works. So this is part art and part science. So I wish there was like one way to do it, but yeah, but that's why we're doing this, right? And I don't know if nothing else came out today. I love what I do. I love this. You know, I want to transfer some of that love to you, and I want you to love it too, because you guys are problem solvers. I mean, that's why you started this. You know, I mean, you're solving a problem for somebody. And the thing is, and this sounds brutal, if you're not, then you're not doing the right thing. So, you know, and that's okay. We can learn and we can move on. I've done that a million times. So. Anything else, Chandler? Anybody else?
No, I just want to say thank you. Just a reminder that the Evolve program is lucky enough to have Dana as an entrepreneur in residence. So if you are a portfolio company from my program or just in the network and you want to work with Dana, please reach out, let me know, and I'll get you two connected. If you are not in the network, reach out anyway and I'll get you two connected. We will figure that out. And if you want to learn more about any of this, just reach out to me. Dana, will your slides be available? for me to send to them?
Sure, the fancy, high quality, very creative slides. Did you like my nobody say anything about Curious George?
Those graphics were amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it was Curious George. I mean, come on, I put a lot of time into finding that.
Listen, they have the information, and that's all that's needed, so.
Yeah.
All right, well, I can't thank you enough. Everybody, thank you for attending. I really appreciate it. I love it when our companies actually take the time to learn from our experts. So thanks again for coming on, and any questions, just reach out.
Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you.
guys.
All right.
Really
Thanks,
grateful.
guys.
Thank you. Bye now.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.